So first and foremost, thank you to everyone who's at home or at the office and listening or watching this today. We're very excited to take a little bit of a different approach to the professionals webinar. Generally, we have someone from our Muse practitioner or professional community presenting, but today we're going to take go down a different road and have Ariel talk about the company and how all of this started and how this amazing product came to be. So please write all of your questions. I'm going to be monitoring them the whole time. So if you see me looking away from the camera anytime, that's what I'm doing. Post in there saying where you're from and what you'd love to learn about, what kind of work you do. It's always good for us to have a good understanding of where our community is. And please, it's all about the questions. So we'll take you through a bunch of background, but we'd love to hear from you guys. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our co-founder and the person who started all of this, Ariel Garten. Ariel, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's awesome to be here. And hello, Muse professionals. It's fantastic to be here with all of you. It's really been an extraordinary honor to be building Muse and see it actually go out into the world and do its good work. And it's through all of you that Muse is actually getting in the hands and on the heads, pardon the pun, of people who could really use to learn how to meditate and allowing that practice to change their life. So I'm super excited to be here with all of you, learning about the way that you use the product, fielding your questions, and giving you more insight into how and why we built the tool.
That's so awesome. So obviously I know a lot about you. I've had the pleasure of working with you for almost 4 years now, from the beginnings of launching it in market. And lots of travel together and talking to lots of people. But for the benefit of the audience, take us through a bit of your background and who you are, both personally and professionally. And we'll start out from there.
Sure. Hello, I'm Ariel. I'm one of the co-founders of Muse. It was myself, along with Trevor Coleman and Chris Amony, who started the venture. My own background is in neuroscience. I've worked in neuroscience research labs from neurogenesis through Parkinson's disease, and I'm a trained psychotherapist. I was in private practice for about a decade, beginning about 2005 to around 2013. Once we really started launching Muse, I closed down the practice to really focus on Muse being in market. So Muse is very much from the world of psychotherapy and neuroscience, married with technology and a little bit of Silicon Valley startup flair.
Totally. So take us through kind of your practice in psychotherapy, and a lot of the people that are listening are psychotherapists and different mental health workers and physical workers. Take us through your experience with that, and kind of, did you use meditation at that time? Were you using these kind of breath awareness techniques and things like that in working with your patients?
So I was really interested in meditation as a tool that could significantly help my clients. We called them patients then, they're clients now, Ben, depending on your practice. And for me, I, as a neuroscientist, was very aware of the benefits of meditation. It was something that I tried to bring into my own daily life from a very young child. I was very interested in the idea of meditation and how you manage your mind, but I was never particularly good at it. And as a therapist, I became very aware of the value of meditation and mindfulness in helping my clients with anxiety, with depression, with trauma, ruminating thoughts. And so I try to bring the practice in, and we do a little meditation in session, and they'd invariably go home and not do a great job of integrating it into their daily life. And then they'd come back the next week, we'd talk about it, we'd talk about some of the insights and some of the shifts and changes that they experienced. And it was frustrating to not really have a mechanism of clearly describing what it was and why it was going to work for them. And I could sit in a session with somebody and meditate with them, and they'd sort of feel like they were getting it, and then they'd go home and they would feel not entirely comfortable with the practice, not really sure if they were doing it, and come home and come back to the session the next week, and progress would be slow. And so alongside of this, I started working with a clinical grade EEG to initially try to control computers with our mind. We were very focused on the idea of thought-controlled technology. Started working in the lab with Dr. Steve Mann. He's the accredited inventor of the world computer, and we were creating concerts where people could make music with their mind. And it became incredibly obvious that we had this tool that allowed you to literally engage with what was going on inside your head. So as a psychotherapist and someone who was schooled in neuroscience, this was fascinating to me. The idea that what's inside our mind, generally this black box that we can only try to inquire with, questions, with words, with introspection, or with a microscope if you're dead or an animal, we now had a tool that in a living, breathing human organism, we could start to use to actually see inside the brain, to make the intangible, invisible workings of the mind in some way tangible and visible. And so while I was doing my therapy practice and struggling these questions of mindfulness and internal transformation, on this other tract, I had discovered this amazing tool that could make the invisible mind visible. But at first we started using it not to understand our own minds, but to try to actually interact with technology. So we made silly things like levitating chairs. As you would relax, the chair would rise. It was a single EEG lead on the back of your head, and as you would relax, your alpha waves would increase, a really basic paradigm, and then it would cause the chair to rise. We made video games on this paradigm, trying to understand how you would use it as a cognitive training tool. Tools that were very simple based on focus. As you would focus, your beta waves would increase, and that would then spin a little log, a rope around a log. This is a game called Zenbound at the time that we made, enabled with EEG. We made Star Wars games EEG enabled. We did everything we could to try to teach people that what goes on inside your head can have a real world correlate, that you can actually harness the power of your brain to control things in the real world. And to us at that point, that was the way that we could demonstrate the power of the human mind. We then sat back and said, okay, we have a crazy idea, like what's the way we can demonstrate the power of the mind in the biggest possible mechanism? Well, this was 2009, so I started this work in 2003 and had progressed all the way to 2009, and the Olympics were coming to Canada the next year. So we put together a proposal for the Ontario government where people in Vancouver could control the lights on the CN Tower, Canadian Parliament buildings, and Niagara Falls with their brain from across the country. And we said, okay, well, this is going to be, this is going to be it. This is going to be the way we're going to show people the power of their brains to have their individual self literally projected 2,000 miles across the country and light up tall buildings. This is how we can demonstrate the agency of a single self and its ability of agency that you can demonstrate across the world. So this was massively successful. We pulled off this crazy project where we allowed people to control the lights on the CN Tower, Canadian Parliament buildings, and Niagara Falls with their brain from across the country at the Olympics. And then from there I said, okay, well, this is amazing. Clearly the future of this technology is in mind controlling stuff. And that's when we really had our aha moment, that it was not about the biggest lights you can control on the biggest buildings. It's not about how we project ourselves across the world. It's not about controlling technology with our brain. It's about actually controlling our own brain, and how can we use technology to help us engage that process of self-control, to bring the locus of control back inside the self. So in my own journey, I've always been fascinated with the stories that we tell ourselves and how we can query those in effective ways to help undo them. And Muse became a really powerful tool to help an individual manage their mind. So during this journey, we're now looking, sort of 2011, and mindfulness was not yet ripe for the prime time. So we took the technology and ultimately by 2011, 2012 started building what as Muse, an EEG that slips on, that gives you real-time feedback on your meditation. The early meditation experiences we built were mainly built by Trevor. He was our chief product officer, and it was a simple flag that waves in the wind. And as you focus, the flag stills, and as your mind becomes distracted, the flag continues to wave. So it was based on this beautiful metaphor of your mind is the pole, and you are the flag that waves in the wind, and you can learn to control it or not control it. And from there went through multiple iterations. And since this was not the time when meditation was in yet, we would tell people, this is a cognitive training tool. You're going to boost the muscle of your brain. It's going to be great. You're going to have a strong brain. And every now and again, somebody would be like, isn't this meditation? Isn't this what a meditation practice is? And we'd say, well, it depends. Do you like meditation? Do you meditate? And if they said yes, we'd be like, oh, good. Yeah, it's meditation. So it took a few years till the meditation market was really ripe and we could really clearly come into our own as it is a tool that helps you meditate. And when we sat down to say, okay, well, what is it that we really want to build and we really want to bring to the world, it was very, very clear that the best use of this technology was to help people meditate. Because even if the technology didn't work, if we could get 10 more people to meditate, we felt we would have done a great service for the world. And to this day, we now have over 5 million sessions of EEG with the technology and meditation with Muse, with the technology that thankfully does work. So we feel like we've, brought our best intention to the forefront, and the tool has really fulfilled the first level of its purpose, which is meaningfully teaching people to meditate every day.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I can just imagine, I'm sure you guys can already see it in how Ariel's speaking now, but she's the most enthusiastic and optimistic person I've ever met, for sure. And I could just imagine those early days of just figuring out what to do with this technology and seeing the response from those people. So what was it like, seeing the reaction of people moving physical things and then being able to bridge that into the reaction of people being able to instead control their mind as opposed to control things?
So controlling physical things is obviously a massive spectacle, but we knew as we were doing it, it was merely spectacle. And as phenomenal as it was to literally sit in a chair and feel yourself rise, there was a transformation in it that the person would understand when they did that, hold on, I have the ability to actually harness my own brain and to put it towards something. So there was a big personal insight that came from it, that you can actually manage your own mind, that you can actually, for many people, for the first time, recognize that you can shift state and you can intentionally shift state. And so we wanted to take the flash in the pan, the gee whiz out of it, and really make the gee whiz the fact that you could control your brain, not that technology across the room could move.
Totally. Did you come to practicing meditation through the technology, or did you have a solid understanding of meditation and then make that fit naturally?
So I had a good understanding of meditation from neuroscience readings. I had a good understanding of meditation from reading literature, from sitting awkwardly in the back of the Buddhist temple down the street way too early on Sunday mornings. But none of that gave me the real felt sense of what I was doing in meditation. None of it actually congealed for me in terms of what my practice was supposed to be, what a meditation feels like, what the experience of actually meditating regularly was. The penny hadn't yet dropped. And it was actually through the process of building Muse, and of course having many long hours with meditators through it, doing retreats, but also using the tool and honing the tool, that I was actually myself able to come to that internal sense of quiet and really touch into those moments of internal total peace.
Amazing. So tell us more about kind of the genesis of the creation. And once I was here during the times in which we kind of moved from messaging and brain training more into the meditation, and I experienced that whole phenomenon firsthand of people saying, this is meditation, why don't you just call it that? And it was quite unique for us as a company, because we had to kind of come to terms with that in a way that we were like, yes, this is meditation and everyone is ready for meditation, and we can do that. So in moving into meditation, did you feel like the genesis was natural from starting with this brain computer interface, moving things into the mind, and where did you think that was going to go once you realized that this was going to allow people to unlock their potential within themselves?
So in the one sense, it was natural because we're trying to control stuff with our minds, so controlling our own minds made sense. But when we actually made the shift to being a meditation tool, there was actually a cultural shift inside the company. Mm-hmm. So everybody inside the company, so Chris, Trevor, and myself, we'd wrapped our heads around meditation. We're fully committed to it. We understood the value, but not everybody around us did. We were surrounded by a bunch of developers and coders, and I'd bring in yoga teachers and they'd feel incredibly awkward, or we'd start to have meditation classes inside the company and people would feel, you could sort of feel that what's going on here now? I'm sharing of myself. This is awkward and fascinating. And so it was a process of, the initial team who came together because they wanted to create thought control technology, and talking about the developers, actually went through a cultural shift as we brought meditation to them. And, meditation, which was inculcated into our lives, became inculcated inside the course of the company. Now inside the course of Muse, everybody meditates. Everybody muses every day. We have regular meditation sessions at the beginning of all our team meetings. We have meditation experts coming through all the time. So it's deeply ingrained, and everybody at the company meditates. But it took a while for that internal shift to happen, just as we saw the kind of cultural shift with meditation becoming part of the mainstream.
So given your background with neuroscience and your experience with meditation, imagine that pivot is happening right now, and you have a group of individuals who you basically have to come forward and say, like, I believe that all of us should be meditating. What's your reasoning for that and your pitch with the neuroscience background, et cetera?
So maybe this is a great time for me to delve into the neuroscience behind meditation, because I'm sure everybody out there has their own pitches as to why meditate, but and I have many of them. Let me take a few minutes to arm you with the fodder of the ways that neuroscience changes your brain. We experientially, as we meditate, understand the ways that meditation changes our experience. It widens the aperture of your experience so that you can be more in the moment, be more here, more now. It teaches you to manage your thought train so you can recognize that you're not your thoughts, and your emotional roller coaster so you can get off of it. But it makes, and I'm happy to expand on all of those concepts in a few minutes, but it makes real fundamental changes in your brain. And so a lot of the work that I'm referring to will come from Dr. Sarah Lazar at Harvard. There are currently over 1,000 published studies in reputable journals of the impact of meditation on multiple aspects of your life. And so in terms of the brain, one thing we know is that meditation thickens your prefrontal cortex. So bad news, everybody. As you age, your prefrontal cortex thins. The good news is, if you maintain a long-term meditation practice, your prefrontal cortex maintains its thickness. So in Dr. Lazar's work, she saw 50-year-olds with a long-term meditation practice with a prefrontal cortex thickness of a 25-year-old. So this seriously impacts your prefrontal cortex. And your prefrontal cortex, of course, is your higher organizational center. It's the part responsible for planning, organization, and inhibitory control. And to me, inhibitory control is a really key concept when we talk about meditation, particularly when we think about it in a therapeutic context. Another thing that meditation does is it downregulates your amygdala. Anybody who's a therapist deeply knows the value of the amygdala and the dysfunction that can happen when your amygdala rages out of control, the fear and the anxiety that come alongside it. Meditation downregulates the activity of your amygdala, and it also can decrease the volume of your amygdala over time. Meditation has also been demonstrated to increase the volume of the left hippocampus, the learning and memory area of the brain. It strengthens the connection of your corpus callosum. That's the relationship between your left and right hemisphere, the axons, nice myelated bundle that goes from one to the other. And it increases the density of your gray matter. So this concept of increasing density of your gray matter comes to play when I talk about it's thickening the prefrontal cortex, it's increasing the volume of the left hippocampus. And for those of you that don't know, the density of your gray matter is essentially related to how intelligent you are. I used to, as a neuroscientist, feel awkward about saying that out loud, but there have now been a number of studies that have demonstrated a really strong correlation between intelligence and gray matter density. Out of Sarah Lazar's work, we see that simply an 8-week course in mindfulness meditation actually increases the density of your gray matter. That's phenomenal. And for anybody who needs an extra little pitch, Einstein had more gray matter than the average individual. Same. Meditation also serves another important function. It increases the activity in our insula. So insula has numerous functions in the brain and the body, and one of the most prominent ones is the relationship of the sensations in your body. So the increase in insula is partly due to our ability to be more aware of our own bodily sensation. And meditation also increases the activity in our temporal parietal junction, the TPJ. The TPJ is an area of the brain that's implicated in empathy and perspective taking. two extremely important concepts as a therapist, both to encourage our clients to take on new empathy and perspective taking, and of course, as a therapist ourselves, to have deep empathy and the ability to shift perspective and take on our client's perspective. There's many more things that I could talk about in terms of how neuroscience changes the brain, but another incredibly important one to highlight is the work of Dr. Judson Brewer, and he demonstrates that meditation decreases the activity of our default mode network. So the default mode network is the relationship between your prefrontal cortex and your PCC, posterior cingulate cortex here. And it's the circuit that is activated when we're at rest and there's nothing happening. So if you put somebody in an MRI and you say, think about nothing, just let your mind go blank, just simply relax, you'll still see activation in this default mode network. And it's typically described as the ego sense, as an internal chatter, as a sense of self, as an I that keeps chattering away internally. So when we talk about meditation decreasing the activity of the monkey mind, there's this real neural correlate that goes along with it. What you see in a long-term meditator when you put them in an MRI machine and say, just let your mind go blank, that indeed that default mode, that often ruminant internal thought, is decreased and activation significantly brought down. So those are just some of the changes in meditation in the brain.
Wow. I hope it's a good thing this is recorded, because I think this is some this is some really, really good content, and we might even, if you take a look inside the Muse Learn section, if you guys are members of Muse Connect, we have a bunch of really great literature about meditation and the research behind it. It actually ties in pretty interestingly with one of the questions that's been asked. So how in the creation of this meditation training tool did you guys come to kind of figuring out active, neutral, and calm, and what the brain is doing during meditation?
Okay, so this is a really common question. So when we started to build a meditation tool, we had the very difficult task of actually figuring out what goes on in the brain during meditation, and discovered that this is very varied from brain to brain, within the brain from moment to moment, beginning of the day to the end of the day, for example, and also depending on your level of meditation ability. So we started by doing a simple canvas of several dozen meditators, both novice and expert. So we initially started, sitting on the top of a mountain with expert meditators, literally the top of a mountain with expert meditators who could jump from jhana to jhana and try to, correlate the EEG state of each jhana. And then we recognized, and we had some really interesting data that we began to parse. And then we recognized that what an expert meditator can achieve in a short period of time, a novice cannot. And giving expert meditator feedback to a novice wasn't going to create a meaningful experience to the novice. And you had to start literally with each brain where they are at. And that's where the notion of the calibration stage came from. The idea that an individual could sit down and we could take a snapshot of where your brain was, and then from there correlate it to the algorithm. The algorithm that at that point we built over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions, both with totally novice meditators who'd never meditated before. We'd watch them over the first 10 days of meditation and see where the brain would change over that time, with expert meditators and everyone in between. So we started to create an algorithm and then continued to test it with our meditation and non-meditation community and tweak the feedback into a cycle. And at this point, we have literally 5 million sessions of meditation with Muse, 5 million sessions of EEG meditation. And so at this point, our algorithm's gotten extremely precise at understanding the differentiation between focused attention and mind wandering. So to be very clear, Muse doesn't measure your level of stress. It doesn't measure all sorts of random things. It's very specifically looking at focused attention on your breath versus the wandering mind. So you focus your attention on your breath, the sound quiets, your mind wanders, the sound picks up.
Exactly.
So when you look at the question, so to come back to the question of calm, active, and neutral, what we're looking at, calm is also focus. When you look at what happens from an EEG perspective, calm and focus are in many ways synonymous. So calm is when you're focused, and then active is when your mind is wandering. And that's the sort of paradigm that we're assessing.
Perfect. So, you talk about having 5 million sessions of meditation. Is that number crazy to you from the concept of when you were just starting? Like, what was when you first started? How many people did you think you would touch, and what were the goals in launching it as a meditation and brain training tool?
So my mission is to help people undo the knots in their head. That was my mission as a therapist, to help people understand that the stories that they inhabit aren't the stories that have to drive them. That we're all amazing, beautiful, capable human beings. And so often our stories of, oh, I can't do that, I'm insecure, I don't know that I belong. These stories take us away from the experience of being simply who we are. The saddest stat in the world to me is that 85% of the world suffers low self-esteem. And if I could, my thought was if I could solve that, then I would have done something of value. When we launched Muse, we could only hope that it was going to do something of value. We could only hope that it was going to achieve anything, to be honest. We knew we built something significant. We knew that it was grounded in science. We had a lot of collaborators that we worked with that guided us along the way and supported and validated the tool that we were building. But it wasn't until we got the first email of somebody who'd used it, the very first email I recall getting it. It was about 3 weeks after the developer product came out, maybe about a month. And it was a woman who said, I have ADHD, I'm 26 years old, and I've started using Muse. I've noticed a difference. My parents have noticed a difference and mentioned it. And some tools are simply a game changer. This one's actually a life changer. So you can imagine I burst into tears upon reading it, that we'd actually built something that had value for someone. And that feedback has continued, and in the process, the tool has matured significantly. Anybody who started using it in 2014 can see how far it's come, and I promise you, there's much, much, much more on the horizon. But the real value to me was in doing something that was going to help people's lives. And I've always said, Ben, you've probably heard me say this: if it's not helping, literally throw it in the garbage. We don't need to have a company, we don't need to have a tool in market, we don't need to have marketing, we don't need to have any of this shit if it's not actually helping, it's not actually working. And that's the core question that we come back to every day. Like, is this adding value to people's lives, and how can we give them greater and greater value? How can we help people undo the knots in their head? How can we help people achieve whatever it is that they would like out of their lives without us being prescriptive?
So what's the area in which that excites you most, or that's kind of, since getting that initial email, that's got you most excited about the potential for this type of technology and the potential for just spreading meditation and mindfulness? We've done so much work with so many clinicians and researchers. Share a little bit about which are the things that really stand out to you.
There's so much. So we have an amazing community of clinicians, thousands and thousands of psychotherapists, life coaches, naturopaths, meditation teachers, doctors who in the past would have suggested meditation to their patient. Their patient wouldn't necessarily know how to do it. The doctor may not know how to implement it, and then they go away, and the person with COPD or the person with anxiety, the person with stress wouldn't be able to get the benefit from it. So now, clinicians being able to hand somebody a Muse and say, okay, go meditate here, and I can be there holding your hand with it, and I can track your compliance, and if you have any questions, you can come back and look at the data, making it measurable, has been incredible for the therapist community. We've also had a ton of interest from schools. We have some fantastic studies, one with the Kansas State University with grade 8 students. They did an intervention with Muse with grade 8 students and demonstrated a 72% decrease in kids going to detention. So that's the sort of opportunity and promise that gets me really excited, that a kid who you may have difficulty convincing to meditation, what's that? Now that you give them a tangible tool with a little bit of gamification, you're really able to engage a younger population and get them rocking. We also have fantastic clinical studies going on. So one that's been going for the long term is a relationship that we've had with Mayo for the last several years. They've been using Muse with breast cancer patients awaiting surgery, which just warms my heart. So the women receive a Muse 4 weeks prior to surgery, and they use it for 2 weeks after. And it's been demonstrating fantastic success, looking at decrease in stress during the cancer care process. And now we're looking at if there's an improvement in recovery times as well. And this study was so successful, Mayo said even before the end of it, we need to open it up multi-site to every Mayo site, and also open it up to other patients awaiting different forms of surgery, because we see that the intervention's been really meaningful. So it's, studies like that that are really significant to me. I should actually also mention the recent study that came out of the Catholic University in Milan. So there, just one moment, I'm just gonna grab a drink of water. The Catholic University in Milan did 2 studies using Muse with the population group. The earlier one was just sort of a setup study demonstrating that you can run a study using Muse. The second one that was just published demonstrated the efficacy that they saw with Muse. So they had 40 university students, a group of 20 who were taught a regular mindfulness meditation, focused attention on the breath, and a group of 20 who were given Muse. And the time course was over 4 weeks. For the first week, students did it for 10 minutes a day, and they gradually moved up in the amount of time. For the last week, they did it 20 minutes a day. And they demonstrated with both groups an improvement in calm and decrease in stress, and improvements in the perceived stress score, which is great. They demonstrated an improvement in cognitive function, and one of the measures of cognitive function that was used was the Stroop task. So in the Stroop task, I'm sure most people who are listening to this are familiar with it, but for those who aren't, in the Stroop task, you're shown a word, which is the name of a color. So you see the word red, R-E-D, and you see it in a font color. And that font color may be red, it may be blue. And you're then asked to say the color of the font. So our temptation is to read the word as opposed to say the color of the font. And if you meditate with Muse, it was demonstrated in the study that you were able to say the color of the font, blue, significantly faster than had you not meditated with Muse. And so that finding is interesting because it correlates with the finding from our Baycrest study that demonstrated the exact same thing, that average individuals who've used for 6 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day for 6 weeks, saw a 50 millisecond improvement in the Stroop task in our Baycrest study. So we now actually have 3 separate studies demonstrating Muse improves reaction time on Stroop task. Now that's significant because Stroop task is a very complex task where you're asked to do very quick decision making in a stressful situation where you have competing pieces of information. And so using Muse actually improves your reaction time in difficult decisions in stressful situations with conflicting info. So we can look at meditation, and particularly meditation with Muse, as a tool that allows you to become more efficient in your processing and more efficient in your ability to come up with those answers on the spot. With Muse, we also saw an improvement in another go, no-go task. And then this was the first study with Muse that actually demonstrated persistent changes in brain state relative to meditation. So in this study, they also looked at the EEG, separate from Muse, pre and post, both for the people who are meditating without Muse and with Muse. Those who meditated with Muse relative to controls demonstrated a persistent shift in their alpha state. So after they were done their meditation sessions, you could continue to see an increase in alpha. And an increase in alpha is associated with calm, which is what alpha is typically referred to. An increase in alpha also refers to an increase in your ability to have internally focused sensory processing. So alpha is a marker of focus. In other studies, we say alpha is a marker of increased competency and efficiency. So when you look at a baseball player, for example, who's making the perfect hit, hitting a home run, or a diver who's doing the perfect dive, it's not a cognitive process that they're engaging when you're an expert who engages a skill. You are actually seeing an increase in alpha activity in times when pro athletes, for example, have perfect scores. So if you're seeing beta during that activity, they tend to not do as well as when you see alpha. So alpha is generally seen as this measure of cognitive efficiency. So lots of information, but roundabout way of saying that those who meditated with Muse actually saw this persistent shift in brain state at the trait level, not just the state level being simply when you're doing the activity, trait level being something that is now persistent as a characteristic of the individual. And those that didn't meditate, that meditated with regular meditation, not with Muse, didn't see the same shift in brain activity.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, so that was another one of those moments where, you work extremely hard and try to be extremely fastidious in what you're building and really try to, serve the needs, be extremely fastidious in the science and how you're implementing it. And over time, it really pays off. And, the data comes back and says, hey, this actually works. So that was, both a fantastic validation for the product and, really a heartwarming personal validation.
Absolutely. And it's such a pleasure working so closely with the practitioners community, because every day I get that validation back from people who are using it with individuals and getting those success stories back. I know that here as a company, we're very motivated by improving mental health in general.
Yeah.
And we really feel that this unity of meditation, neuroscience, and technology is the way in which we can do that and teach the most people. But I'd love to hear your perspective, and I know that you're a big advocate of mental health, and for you to address the audience about that.
Sure. So you just said it, I'm a massive advocate for mental health. As I shared earlier, the saddest stat in the world that 85% of the people have low self-esteem, are all of ourselves included. And so, my mission was really to help people understand that you don't have to exist in the state that is unseen. Most of us suffer doubly, not simply that we're living, unhappy lives because of the internal dialogue that we have and the social structure that we feel stuck in, but we don't even see what the problem is. We don't even see that there is another option. We don't even see that there is a mechanism, whether it's through, therapy or acupuncture, if that's what you find helpful, or meditation. There are millions of mechanisms out there, but most people don't recognize that there are mechanisms that they can use to really both analyze and address and then change their internal world. And so with Muse, it was really our hope to broadly distribute a new tool and a new modality and a mechanism, and take the ancient practice of meditation that we knew was so valuable and introduce it in a modern way that was going to be potentially more palatable and more acceptable for the modern consumer. We also know that technology is so much of the problem, but technology is utterly inescapable these days. So our wish was to use technology as a tool that was going to help, rather than a distraction that was going to pull away or oppress. So our goal in creating Muse was something where the technology disappears as much as possible. And I know everybody gets so excited, like, Muse, it's this really cool new tech tool. But it's really not about Muse at all. It's not about the cool technology. It's simply about the human experience and how you can learn to understand yourself and shift. And as we designed with the soundscapes, for example, we tried to come up with metaphors and experiences that were really going to mirror the mind. So it didn't sound like you're listening to this thing. It sounded like, okay, this is a mirroring of my own mind. And so I can sit here with my mind when it's noisy, when it's quiet, and be here inside of myself.
Amazing. So we're getting a lot of questions from people. First and foremost, everyone is speaking about how fantastic this is and how great it is to hear about the neuroscience. So it's great to hear how passionate people are about that, and we'll be sure to develop more content for that. There's been a lot of questions about kind of what's next for Muse, and specific features like, will there be more guided sessions, will there be music meditation sessions, etc. And kind of, will Muse move beyond meditation? So take us through what you see as the vision, and from what you can share, what's next for the company.
Sure. So as some of you may be aware, we recently merged or acquired a company called Meditation Studio. Meditation Studio came out of Gaian's yoga studio, if anybody's familiar with that. Meditation Studio has a library of over 500 amazing meditations from phenomenal meditation teachers, literally all over the world. And as you know, Muse has expanded internationally, and Meditation Studio is doing the same. And so with that merging of the two worlds, we now have an amazing body of content and teachers. So over time, you can certainly expect that the most common request, which is, please, can we have more content for Muse, is going to be fulfilled. It's going to take a little bit of time for our two organizations to actually merge. We have some incredibly exciting projects upcoming as we look to how Muse can help us understand not just our minds, but our bodies overall. So you can expect that over the next 4 to 6 months, you're going to see significant upgrades in the product, and a much greater broadening of the range of experiences and content inside the Muse bucket.
Definitely. And one of the main things as being a member of the professionals community, everyone that's listening and being on this professionals mailing list, is we really hope to use you guys as practitioners as kind of the testing ground for any new experiences. And as we've developed protocols and developed challenges, that this is the first community that we bring everything to. So we thank you guys for all the feedback, as you guys are helping us kind of develop more and more of this.
I have to echo that. It's been fantastic to work with the thousands of professionals in the community and build, in many cases with you guys, literally one-on-one relationships between you and Ben or Jeff. And then I get to hear about them often secondhand. But you guys really are the Muse family and the Muse community. And so being able to support each of you and understand how Muse impacts your life and your client's life is really how Muse is growing. So thank you all for using it and building that relationship with us so that we can really help improve it for everyone.
Yeah, it's unbelievably important to the development of the product to hear the feedback, and it's really kind of what keeps us going as a company, is sharing the gratitude that we see from the users.
And the shared goal that we all have. I know each and every one of you are here because you want to make people's lives better. That's why we've signed up to these crazy professions that keep us up late at night, and put us in funny situations, getting intimate with one another, with our clients, with their goals, with their needs. We are all here to help and to amplify what's possible in every human being. So thank you for being on this journey, all of us. Thank you for all the amazing work that you do, helping your clients see the lives that they want to see.
There's been a lot of questions about your experience in using other devices in getting to Muse, specifically emotive and kind of other EEG devices. So tell us about the journey, and I know you know the founders of the other companies. Talk a little bit about
that. So we all basically matured around the same time. Initially, it was ourselves, NeuroSky and Emotive, and we started in about 2003. I think NeuroSky the same year. Maybe Emotive started 2004. So we really were all building the industry together, and we're actually friends with one another. Tan and I are, we're two female founders and CEOs, when I was the CEO, of EEG companies that are coming to market with consumer EEG. Our husbands both have the same name and the same profession. So we're definitely significant supporters of one another, and have, seen each other grow with different devices in different markets and different approaches. But throughout time, really felt the value of having multiple people in the space, because it was an emerging industry. I mean, you're creating a category. Nothing like this really existed prior to the three big main companies, ourselves, NeuroSky, and Emotive. And then over time, saw Zeo rise, which was fantastic. Unfortunately, saw them fail because they weren't able to work out their business model effectively. And now see many younger startups coming up with EEG products, or attempting to go after sleep or lucid dreaming, a lot of which supporting and advising as they find their own niche in the market. And then it's also been interesting seeing the rise of other companies who've built on top of Muse, of which there are dozens, including MindLift, who've been going after the ADHD market, and we've been supporting them, building their product. Divi Cruise and OptiHerence, creating their golf product, and many more. So it's really been, we've all been creating an industry together where there was none before.
And that ties in really well with a question that Joe just posed, which is, how accurate are the results from Muse and consumer EEG devices compared to those that you would previously used in the laboratory?
Sure. So we've used many different forms of EEG in the laboratory, from single sensor, 19 channel setups, 128 setups. Muse on a channel by channel basis is extremely accurate. So Muse, we've had lots of third-party validation using Muse alongside things like gold standards, ActiChamp, or a Biosemi. Biosemi is probably the most commonly known gold standard EEG, and the signal that you get from one another is virtually indistinguishable. If you layer the two EEG traces on top of one another from a particular location on the head. So you'll put a Muse here and then the biosemi right next to it, you're going to get essentially the same signal. And with the biosemi, you'll be using gel. With the Muse, it'll be completely dry sensor. And we do that using significant changes in the impedance and the composition of the sensors and in the bioelectric potential of the skin. Meaning you need a little bit of sweat to get the right bioelectric potential of the skin, but so long as your skin is not, incredibly parched, you're going to get a good signal pretty quickly. Muse is only 4 channels, 2 frontal, FP1 and FP2, and temporal, T9 and T10, with a reference in the center at FPZ. Typically in a clinical grade, in a clinical setup, you have references on the ears. We use that ear location actually as a real sensor. And so you're getting good, clean EEG from there. There's not a lot of muscle activity to pick up there. But if you want to compare it to a 128, you often have to re-reference, because move the reference from here to there, and you do that mathematically. So this is a long-winded way of saying on a sensor-by-sensor basis, Muse is the same, but we only have 4 channels. So you're not, for example, reading what goes on at the back of the head. You can infer a little bit by doing some analysis at the 4 channels and kind of look at activity in the 4 quadrants of the head. And there's a few groups who've taken our Muse data and created that kind of a visualization with it.
Awesome.
So
and all of that,
I cannot see what we do not have sensors for, but the sensors that we have are accurate.
Yeah, and all of that, the technical specs and a lot of those comparisons are available in the Learn section of Muse Connect, and on our technical specifications. And Roy's asked if we've developed any new materials that we find useful in giving to patients, and a lot of that as well is in that Learn section. The thing that we've seen recently, which has worked really well, are these challenges that we've developed, and we have three-week challenges now inside Muse Connect. They're just essentially workbooks which you can print out and give to a client or patient, and have them kind of jot down notes, and all of it's kind of based in MBSR, and we've brought forward different themes like finding your focus and opening your awareness. So I'd really recommend people checking that out. Do you have any tips, given your previous practice and your experience with the product itself, for how to bring it into practice, Ariel?
So, I mean, to me, Muse solves a tremendous gap in the practice experience, which is A, how do you teach somebody to meditate? And so Muse allows you to do that. And B, how do you ensure that they're actually doing it every day? So, my clients would go away and I wouldn't see them for a week, or sometimes 2 weeks, or sometimes a month, depending on the frequency that I'd see a particular client. And this gave me a touch point to ensure that somebody was actually doing their work every day, that every day they were taking the opportunity to make it better. What Muse itself doesn't do is actually help unearth it from the patient why this is so meaningful in their life and the changes that they've seen. So there's still an incredibly important relationship between the patient our client who's now learning to meditate, and the therapist whose role it is to unearth the value of that for the client, and to take your own knowledge and experience of meditation and the changes that it makes, that you learn both through your felt experience of meditating and through your reading and education about it, and then hold up the mirrors to your client and say, okay, well, have you noticed this now that you've been meditating for a little while? Have you seen this? Have you felt this? How has this shifted for you? So it's all of our roles as good therapists in multiple domains to bring that experience to life for the patient or the client, and to help them unearth and therefore enhance the shifts that it's already making for them.
Exactly. And what we've really seen is that practitioners who are able to utilize it best with their clients are those that are able to talk about it from their own personal experience, and really explain to someone what's going to happen and just set them up for success in that way. And that's our goal in everything that we're doing with all these webinars and all the training materials. So if there is anything that you as the listeners can think of that would help you in presenting both Muse or just meditation in general to your client and patient population, just please write to us. Write a comment or write to professionals@choosemuse.com, or just to our customer care. you know, we're always taking that feedback and trying to develop more and more tools to make the product make sense and contextualize it for people.
Also let you know that I'm available to all of you to help you communicate to your audiences. So if your audiences would find it helpful or interesting to have a webinar or for me to be on a podcast, I'm happy to help you communicate the value of meditation to your audience.
Yeah, and you've done such an amazing job. It's been so cool to see your name popping up on just regular podcasts that I listen to. You know, seeing you there and talking about the product, it's really been amazing to see that. Do you have any answers about kind of the average amount of time most people with a regular practice it would take for you to see a reduction in stress and anxiety? Someone's asking kind of how often should people be meditating to see benefits, etc.
So I can speak from the studies that we have. So in the Baycrest study, it was 10 minutes a day for 6 weeks, demonstrated a decrease in self-reported symptoms of headache, pain, nausea, bodily symptoms, increase in calm, and a shift in Stroop task ability. So that was 10 minutes a day for 6 weeks. We saw, as I mentioned in the University of Milan study, from 10 minutes up to 20 minutes per day. I typically say 10 minutes is a good cadence, and then you want to try to stretch your client if you can up to 20 minutes a day. And that when we look at MBSR, we tend to see it's 20 minutes a day that you want to be practicing over 8 weeks to start to see results. For us, we've seen the 10 to 20 minute sweet spot be excellent.
That's great. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do in terms of the protocols, etc., is just try and create a framework to help people build up their cadence of practice. The framework in which we've created Muse, you know, we understand that 20 minutes is hard to get to at the beginning. So we really try and help you build your practice up, and that's where a lot of the challenge frameworks have been built in that way. When we started it, we were talking about 3 minutes, and you know, because the mindset was just how do we get people to start doing this?
And I would say do not start your clients at 20 minutes a day if they've never meditated before. It's just going to be torturous and the results are not going to come back efficacious. You want to really meet people where they're at and slowly move them up. And for a lot of people, that's meeting them at 5 minutes. That's making this as unintimidating as possible. Have them do it for 5 minutes every day for the first week, then move it up to 10. And then be really cautious when you choose to move it up to 20, maybe move it up to 12. Because 20 minutes can be a painfully long time and start to create a negative experience. And so just make sure that you're there holding their hand and that they're ready to stretch and understand how to sit with discomfort. Because a lot of what we teach people as therapists is to not be afraid of your negative emotions and your experience and be able to manage your discomfort, because your ability to sit through discomfort probably predicts your success in life. Not everybody's ready to be thrown headlong into that experience of managing discomfort of sitting there for 20 minutes. And so you can help your patients and your clients get to that point.
Awesome. Lenny has asked for a convincing video from the neuro side for them to play to their clients. So maybe that's something that you and I will work on together.
Okay, thanks, Lenny. That's a good takeaway.
So there are a lot more questions, but we're kind of wrapping up on time here. One of the, there's been some amazing feedback from the audience about more challenges in the application. And that's something that we're definitely working on. And we actually did a fantastic internal meditation challenge as a company, which was really fun. And that's one of the things that we're looking through. Good comments about wanting a smaller hard case. I have that as well. I travel lots for work and I could fit many muses in the hard case, so it's great for a lot of muses, but but I feel you, and we're also looking into what we can do with that.
I have to tell you all my secret. I just throw it in my purse with that case.
Yeah,
it's more robust than you think.
People always get scared when I do it, but I'm like, you can and don't do it at home. I'm experienced in it, but you can really bend a Muse pretty far back, and there's no issues whatsoever. It's a very strong and robust product. Again, don't try it, but we've.
If you do have customer care standing by.
Exactly, we do have customer care standing by, and Ariel and I have brought Muses around to hundreds of places and touched thousands of heads, and the product is very robust. So I'm just going to finish it off with just kind of like a final question. which kind of circles around, how Muse fits into meditation practice in a larger scope. And you talked about the fact that what we're measuring is specifically focused attention meditation. And we've had some questions about, mantra-based meditations or other meditations. In speaking with someone who is looking at exploring a lot of meditation or who already has a practice and wants to fit Muse in, how do you suggest that the product fits in with that kind of greater awareness of meditation?
Sure. So as Ben just mentioned, Muse is specifically focused attention on the breath. You can shift the object of your attention around to different things. So if somebody wants to explore focused attention on the heart and do a heart-focused meditation to open compassion, you can certainly do that. If you want to shift it down to your stomach and to your dantian, you can do that. So you can explore where sensation can be felt in different parts of your body. So long as you are focused specifically on an area of your body, Muse is awesome. If you want to do a mantra-based practice, depending on how you do your mantra, sometimes it works with the Muse algorithm, sometimes it doesn't. Because remember, we're looking very specifically at focused attention on one thing relative versus busyness of the mind. So depending on how you focus your meditation, that can take some experimentation. Often people who want to experiment in different forms of meditation will still use Muse as their first 5 minutes. So you'll sit down and you'll do a Muse session, which will drop you down into the present moment, into your mind and into your body, really focus you in, and then you can go forward on the next range of meditations that you hope to explore. And really, we do hope that you explore a range of meditation. Muse should be a jumping off and a gateway. It is not meant that you muse and only muse each and every day. It is a thing that allows you to understand what meditation is, the value of it, what it can do for you. And as you expand in your practice, please expand in the range of meditation experiences that you try without Muse. But most people find that Muse is something that's helpful to go back to every now and again, either before your practice or every week or whatever the cadence is once you've become an expert, and to bring you back and to help you check in and continue to guide you and encourage you along the way.
And to add to that, there's so many different things and different ways in which you can use the headband. Like I personally lately have loved having like in-person guided meditations when we do our Tuesday meeting and there's a guidance and I just wear my Muse headband. I don't have the feedback whatsoever. And I'm just able to get this kind of report card snapshot at the end of the session that gives me an idea of what was going on. It's especially cool, as you talked about, if you are doing focused attention at the beginning and then an open monitoring or a loving kindness, and you can see kind of how the activity changes between the two meditations. So play around with the different soundscapes and using no guidance. There's a lot of different ways in which the headband can be utilized and find the sweet spot that works for you. So that's it for today.
I also say we made it, but it's now yours, and exactly. It's yours. Build on top of, to build protocols with, to find value in and to create value through. So we certainly don't have all the answers, and we're excited to hear what everybody else has done and how you take it and you move it into your practices and your lives.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for spending the time today. There were a lot more questions that we didn't get to. I will personally respond. I'll personally respond.
Apologies to everybody's question I couldn't answer.
We'll respond to each of them tomorrow. And there's been a lot of questions about kind of beta testing, which is really cool. And that's definitely something that we would love to engage with and work with this community. So we will be sending out emails to the professionals mailing list to invite people to test out some new features as we develop new experiences. So stay tuned for that. Ariel, thank you as always for leading the way. For bringing such an amazing product to the lives of everyone and to my life, and for being such an inspiring and fantastic leader at this company.
Thank you so much, Ben, for your work. Thank you to everybody who's listening today, everybody who will listen thereafter. And I'm extremely grateful for the time and attention that everybody's put in taking this tool to help improve people's lives through it. So thank you for all your good work.
Fantastic. Please, any further questions, any feedback, please send it in to professionals@choosemuse.com, and we'll be sending out email correspondence with the recording after and maybe even snipping out some of the neuroscience side of it as a teaser for people. Thanks so much again, and have a great night, everybody.